Hello and welcome to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg and I'm here today to react to the finalists for the National Book Award for Fiction 2025. This is one of the prizes I enjoy following, and every major book prize has surprises, and this has been a fairly big year for surprises from the finalists for the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction and this sort of reveal that James almost lost. I have a video about that. I'll link it down below. To the surprises we got moving from the Booker Longlist to the Shortlist to now the National Book Award. So in my most recent Friday Reads video, I didn't do a full prediction for what would make it onto the list of finalists for the National Book Award for Fiction, but I did say that I felt very confident that the biggest contenders to make it onto the shortlist were The Wilderness by Angela Flournoy, Flashlight by Susan Choi, and A Guardian and a Thief by Megha Majumdar. And I did say, I think this is also where the big surprise is going to come, because at least one of these books isn't going to make it. And even then, I was quietly thinking to myself that two of them were very likely to be among the final five. And the reality is, only one of them made it. So just like I started my Booker shortlist asking what happened to Endlings, I'm starting my National Book Award reaction by saying, especially Wilderness, what happened to The Wilderness? And what happened to Flashlight? Now, this is on the finalist list for the Booker Prize. So I guess the National Book Award just decided, you know what, we're going to leave this one to the Booker and focus on some other books and see how that goes. I guess Susan Choi is eligible for the Women's Prize next year. Same thing with Angela Flournoy. I guess we'll have to see if they make the cut there, but it feels very surprising to me that they are not moving forward, especially since the National Book Award tends to like quirky novels. They went through a phase where they really leaned into that very hard, and they've come out on the other side of it, but they still like books that are a little daring and different, and Flashlight would have fit that bill. But I will say Flashlight does feel a little bit more like a Booker book than a National Book Award book. But since they have sort of shed some of the quirkiness, they've also been really good at representing diverse authors and diverse stories, and The Wilderness felt like an exceptional fit for that. So I'm starting this with the surprises for what didn't make it onto the shortlist for the National Book Award for Fiction. They call it finalists. I call it shortlist just because that's the terminology that has become so common at this point. But let's run through the 5 books that did make it and then talk a little bit more in depth about each one and the books that didn't make it. So the books that made it onto the list of finalists are The True Story of Raja the Gullible and His Mother by Rabi Alameddine, Palaver by Brian Washington, A Guardian and a Thief by Megha Majumdar, The Antidote by Karen Russell, and North Sun, or The Voyage of the Whale Ship Esther by Ethan Rutherford. And A Guardian and a Thief is obviously the book that I had said was probably among the 3 heaviest hitters that did make it onto the actual shortlist. And I suppose you could, if you're making an argument about the National Book Award being really good at recognizing a diverse range of stories compared to other awards that fairly often center white people, you could say Brian Washington sort of fits that. And I am trying to be careful about this because I don't want it to sound like Angela Flournoy and Brian Washington are like diversity hires. That is not at all what I think is happening. I think the National Book Award, what I'm trying to say is that the National Book Award is very good at recognizing a diverse array of authors. And you can see that even with the inclusion of Rabi Alameddine and so on and so forth. So when they announced the long list, they had a very helpful page on their website that talked about each of the books, and I was able to use those as summaries. They did not do that this time around, but that's also because they announced all of the shortlists on the same day. So what I'm going to try to do is tomorrow have a video about the translated literature list, and then I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not going to look at nonfiction or young people's literature, but today I'm doing fiction, and I might try to film the video about translated literature today, but hopefully you'll have it tomorrow. That's the plan. Let's see how it goes. So stay tuned for that. And, it's already a big week for book prizes because they've started announcing the Nobel Prizes, and Thursday we'll be getting the winner of that, and I will hopefully be able to do a reaction on the day it's announced. Really excited to see what ends up winning that prize. So what we should do first is talk a little bit about the books that have made it and speculate about what will win. The downside is that I have not read any of the books that are on the shortlist at this point. There are some that I would like to read, so hopefully I will be getting around to that. And let's first talk about The True Story of Raja the Gullible and His Mother by Rabi Alameddin. Now, I started a different book by Rabi Alameddin. I am opening their page to see what it is. The Wrong End of the Telescope. That is the one that I started. And it's not that it was a bad book. It was one of those cases where I started it and just really, I'm a mood reader. I was not in the mood for that book at that time. And I had gotten it from the library, so I returned it. And then the danger with that is that you never end up getting back to the book. And that happened to me. Rabi Alameddin was previously in the mix for the National Book Award for An Unnecessary Woman, and I've heard good things about that book as well. I love the title, The True Story of Raja the Gullible and His Mother. So here is what this book is about. I'm not going to do the full description, or I'm going to try not to do the full description, just, to save time. Let's make this a short video. So the big highlight in the blurb is, from National Book Award finalist and winner of the PEN/Faulkner Award for Fiction comes a tragicomic love story set in Lebanon, a modern saga of family, memory, and the unbreakable attachment of a son and his mother. And I think I feel bad having not finished The Wrong End of the Telescope. I think Rabi Alameddin is a writer that I have sort of intended to revisit. And of course, now that there's a sense of urgency attached to this book, this is one of the ones that I would be very interested in reading. And we have until November 19th, I believe. Let me double check my date for that. That is when they will be announcing the winners. Yes, Wednesday, November 19th is when the winners will be announced. And at the link down below to the National Book Award or National Book Foundation site, you can RSVP for the ceremony, not the live event, which will be held, but to watch it streamed. I do that every year, and I find it very fun to do so. Anyway, so The True Story of Raja the Gullible is one of the books that I would really like to read. And I have not, I sort of forgot to check my local library and see if there's an audio out as another option. So those are the routes I would probably take, but this is definitely one that I would like to read. And, since Rabi Alameddin has been in the mix before, it isn't altogether surprising that they made it onto the shortlist. Honestly, I won't be surprised if this one ends up winning. But we'll have to wait until November 19th to find out if that ends up being true. And again, I will have links to all of the books, shortlist and longlist, in the description box down below. Those links will take you to bookshop.org. If you want more information about the books, you can go there to get some more. You can also purchase the books there, and you could also check your local independent bookstore or your local library, because it's always good to support both of those things. The next one is Palaver by Brian Washington. Brian Washington is an author. He first published a story collection called Lot, and I did not finish it. And it showed promise to me, but it felt a little bit like a first collection, and it sort of felt like things an author might have developed while they were, say, doing an MFA program and then got a publishing deal for it and released it. And I have never read any further with Brian Washington, but I've heard good things about his subsequent books, and I have meant to get around to them. I do have access to the audio of Palaver, which, by the way, will not be out until November 4th. And I know that is a frustration. for me and a lot of other people, that it has happened more and more frequently that we see books on a long list and now a short list that have not been released. So that would be a pre-order link down below. And I can't fix the system, but I do agree that it's frustrating for the people following along when you might get excited about a title and you don't have access to it. And I'm lucky because I have a booktube channel, so I do have access to the audio, early access, and I can go that way. But if you don't have that, it's really annoying to potentially get excited about a book and have to wait a month or 2 months if we include the long list to get around to reading it. And the very short blurb that they have at the top of the description is a life-affirming novel of family, mending, and how we learn to love from the award-winning Brian Washington. This is another one I would be really interested in reading, especially since I do have access to the audio and early access at that. So and the tricky thing is, I don't know that I would prioritize either the true story of Raja the Gullible and his mother or Palaver to read like in October. We'll have to see, but they feel like things I would potentially catch up to in November. Maybe before the actual prize announcement, maybe not. I don't know, but it will be interesting to see if I get to them and if they win. I feel not altogether sure that Palaver is going to end up winning, but I do feel pretty good about the chances of the next one, which is A Guardian and a Thief by Megha Majumdar. And I'm sorry, this is another one that is not out yet, but this one is coming out October 14th. So 1 week from the day that I am filming this video, it will be released and people will be able to read it. And I really want to read this book. And even I haven't been able to get access to it. I was lucky with Palaver. I have not been lucky with A Guardian and a Thief, but I do definitely want to read it. Megha Majumdar released a book a couple of years ago called A Burning. I really wanted to read it at the time. I have a copy on my shelf, and I've talked in Book Haul Revisits about how as time goes on, I start to think like, am I ever going to get around to reading this? And people always tell me, oh, no, it's great. Don't unhaul it. Make sure you read it. It's good. But now I really want to do A Guardian and a Thief. And if I like this one, I'll go back and read A Burning because I've just heard a lot of very good things about it. I think without the presence of The Wilderness and Flashlight, I think A Guardian and a Thief has to be acknowledged as the front runner at this point. But the thing about the National Book Award is sometimes they love an underdog. So in that way that you just never know what's really going to happen when it comes to a book prize, you don't know if the front runner is going to be the one that emerges victorious at the end or if it will be another book. But if you're a betting person, I do think A Guardian and a Thief would be the most likely winner come November 19th. Here is the very short, it's longer than the one for Palaver, but the short intro to the description of the book. And this, by the way, is already a finalist for the Kirkus Prize, very similar to The Wilderness. And I do find the Kirkus Prize to be very reliable. All right, Megha Majumdar's electrifying new novel, following her acclaimed New York Times bestseller, A Burning, longlisted for the National Book Award, is set in a near-future Kolkata, India, ravaged by climate change and food scarcity, in which two families seeking to protect their children must battle each other. A piercing and propulsive tour de force. I really want to read this book. I'm very much looking forward to it. 1 more week and it will be out in the world, and we will all be able to see if this is a book that lives up to the hype or if, like The Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny on the Booker side of things, this is a book that will have a lot of hype because it hasn't been released at the time of the long list and even at the time of the shortlist. But then people finally start to read it and start thinking, it's okay. We'll see if that ends up happening to A Guardian and a Thief. The next book is The Antidote by Karen Russell. Karen Russell was a Pulitzer Prize finalist for her debut novel, Swamplandia. That was the wild year where there were 3 finalists for the Pulitzer Prize for fiction, but the board failed to select a winner. I have a whole video about that. I will link it down below. It's nuts. And although Swamplandia is not the book that I would make a case for among that final 3, it is a very interesting book. And Karen Russell has had a very interesting career. her subsequent book releases have been much more muted than Swamplandia, but it does feel like there was a lot of anticipation around The Antidote. Things did quiet down after it was published earlier this year. I have an advanced reader's copy of it, by the way. It was released in hardcover. But now, with the National Book Award, it does feel like this is getting a sort of revival. And you start to think, all right, maybe it will be in the mix for other big things, some best of lists and all of that. It does sound like an odd book, but I did mention that the National Book Award has a history of liking sort of odd, quirky books. And this could be one of those. For instance, there are illustrations, and, we don't have a whole lot of time to get into the quirkiness of this book. It is one that I would be interested to catch up to, but I just haven't really managed to do it yet. This is described very briefly as a gripping Dust Bowl epic about 5 characters whose fates become entangled after a storm ravages their small Nebraskan town. All right, so they didn't really get into it. I will say there's a witchy element from what I've heard about this book. And for most people, I'd say that there's a chance that could be sort of out there. But for the National Book Award, it sort of feels like, oh yeah, that sounds right up your alley. So again, you can't count this book out, but I still think A Guardian and a Thief is the likeliest frontrunner for the prize, the way the shortlist has panned out. The final one is one of the books that I had not heard of at the time the Longlist was announced, and from the comments, most everybody else had not heard of either. It's North Sun, or The Voyage of the Whale Ship Esther by Ethan Rutherford. And what the short blurb before it gets to the description says is, from one of our greatest artists of catastrophe, according to Laura Vandenberg, comes North Sun, an allegory of extraction and a tale of adventure and endurance during the waning days of the American whaling industry. And between this one and The Antidote, you can see those sort of lingering traces of the National Book Award leaning in the direction of more odd, quirky books. And I have gotten some interesting feedback, a little bit mixed about North Sun. I think if the National Book Award is going to lean in the direction of something a little quirky and maybe weird, I think they're more likely to go for The Antidote than North Sun. But they also have a history of liking to elevate lesser known authors. So there's still a chance. But if I were going to rank the possible outcomes here, I would say A Guardian and a Thief is the most likely winner. And I'm sort of torn between The Antidote and The True Story of Raja the Gullible and his mother for second place. And I feel like I'm really torn between those two, and I'm trying to talk this out in real time, and it's not getting me anywhere. I think The True Story of Raja the Gullible and his mother, followed by The Antidote by Karen Russell, obviously. Then I might say Palaver by Brian Washington, and then just because I think there's those 4 directions that they could go are already very strong, I'd put North Sun last. If you disagree, I would love to hear your ranking of the potential outcomes of this National Book Award in the comment section down below. I would also really love to hear what you think of this shortlist, and if you are someone who would like to make a case for one of the other books. So the books we say goodbye to from the long list, obviously Flashlight by Susan Choi and The Wilderness by Angela Falerno. I've already talked about them. We also say goodbye to Only Son by Kevin Moffat, The Pelican Child by Joy Williams, and The Sisters by James Hassan Kamiri. I'm sorry. I don't know where Hibbert came from. So those are the books we say goodbye to. Again, I feel very surprised that one or the other of The Wilderness or Flashlight didn't make it. Maybe a little less surprised about Flashlight because it has that Booker appeal going, and there has been a similarity in that it has frequently happened in recent years that a book that is on the Booker shortlist also makes it to the National Book Award shortlist. Maybe this year they're trying to distance a little bit from that, but yeah, this is the outcome that we got. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are about the National Book Award for Fiction race this year, what you are pleased about, what surprises you, what maybe disappoints you, all that in the comment section down below. As always, I really appreciate your time, and I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.